We are recording, I think.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CHAOSS Data Science Working Group. Excited to have all of you here and to catch up with you since I've missed the last couple of meetings. Um, we have an icebreaker, which I've seen many of you have responded to, and I see Peculiar is on there as well, commenting. So welcome. Um, for our project updates, I did miss the last couple, so I wanted, but we'll go through this in order. Um, I think the first one we have here is from Sophia on a taxonomy crowdsourcing project. Sophia, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sadly, Sophia can't make it to the meeting after
Oh,
on
that's
the
right. I'm so sorry. Yes, she did
um,
say that she was out.
but
So,
I can give you a quick update. So she has started kind of putting together a framework for people to put their taxonomies into our repo. So that's what's at this link. And she also gave a talk on this topic at FOSDEM, and the videos, most of the videos are live. So you could probably go back and watch her FOSDEM talk as well, which was in the open research dev room. And then hopefully in 2 weeks, she can come back and give us more details on that project.
well, thanks, Dawn. And I'll go in there and I'll grab it and add a link here for anyone who's interested in watching it. I'm gonna watch it, so I'll go look for it.
Thanks.
All right.
I can take the next one too, because I was involved a little bit in this one. So we don't have anyone from the Tucson or anyone from the CHAOSS Africa researchers team, but they are starting to work on this project. We did get an updated email from Brian with a bunch of Apache JSON files, which is super helpful. So I think, and maybe Sal, you can talk to some of the CHAOSS Africa researchers folks and see if they need any help pulling the data out of the JSON files, because for Apache, we have the JSON files. For the CNCF, we have that landscape YAML. So for those two, we can probably start building the data sets for those foundations.
Yeah, cool. I was waiting for this call to see if I could offload it to anyone, but since I can't, this simply is just like pulling it with Percival and then getting it into the Grimoire lab, correct? Which is like,
No,
and
this
what?
is this is like a step. This is like a step before that. So I think that right now what we need to do is put together basically a data set that has some of the basic information in it. So maybe like a CSV file or another JSON or YAML, which has things like the repo URL, the dates that it was put into the foundation. And if we pulled that out of the YAML file and as much information as we can, because we might need some other stuff later, then I think we'll be in a better position to put it into either Augur or Grimoire Lab, depending on what the team decides to use. But I think the first step is probably just building these data sets so that we know what data we have.
Cool. Okay, so I will put a list of what we're going to try to scrape and pull and a first suggestion of how to do it. And as soon as I get consensus from the team, I will sort of walk them through how to do that. And then from there, is it Percival to Grimoire Lab? And
Uh,
with a simple enough JSON file, this is what I was worried about. We'll
um,
figure it
Do we have a
Sean,
description of what's in the JSON file?
there are different JSON files for different
Mhm.
foundations. We do have descriptions well, we have a description for what's in the JSON file because from Brian, it's a big pile of JSON files. For Apache, for the CNCF, it's one landscape YAML file, but it needs to be parsed because the landscape has loads of stuff that's not CNCF projects. So we just need to filter that by sandbox, incubating, and graduated.
Yeah,
But
which
I
would
think what
be
we need to decide is whether we want to go the Grimoire Lab route or the Augur route for the data.
okay.
Um, and frankly, I'm not sure what the researchers team wants to use.
I mean, I think so. I think both, my understanding, I think Grimoire Lab actually works largely the same as Augur in terms of it's usually accustomed to getting its own data. But I guess are these files in a format that Grimoire Lab expects, for example? I'm just trying to figure, I'm thinking about like the ingestion piece, right?
Yeah.
So like in the case of Augur, we usually just get data from the GitHub API and the commit log. And my understanding is Grimoire Lab does something quite similar, although Percival, it has more flexibility or fluidity
Yeah.
to it, but it
So I think
does
there's
expect structure.
yeah, I think there's a pre-processing step that we need to do, which is why I'm suggesting that we pull the data out of YAML and put it into a CSV file, because there's data that we have in the JSON files that we need and in the YAML file. And then there's data that's going to have to be manually gathered for this
Yeah.
particular project. So, oh yeah, that's the landscape YAML file.
Yeah. So the JSON files that we're getting from that we're trying to process, we're processing differently from like their GitHub stats. It's different info, right?
Um,
It just needs its own
Like
pathway.
is Brian providing data that's otherwise not available, or do we have a description of the data Brian's providing?
Sean, are you familiar with this project that we're trying to gather the data for?
I'm
Can
not
I
sure.
can I get the screen back? Uh,
Is this the corporate projects moving to foundations page
yeah,
that we have linked?
yeah. Because I think that so the reason I say that is because there's all right, sorry. Let me just back way up and let me talk for a few minutes, and then Sean, you can talk. But I
I'm
think
sorry. I'm just asking questions, trying to orient
I know,
myself.
I know, but I'm
Yeah,
not able to successfully make my point.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So what we need is data that's going to be fed into a tool, whether it's Augur or Grimoire Lab. I think we need to figure that out. But before we do that, we need to know the dates that we care about. We need to know the repo URLs. And then there's this other set of data that we're going to need, things like what company or what entity donated it, which is going to be research that someone's going to have to do that's going to be manual. We can't get that from GitHub, but it's data that we're going to need. We're also going to need like the previous URL, which is also not data that is going to be in any of these JSON or YAML files that somebody's going to have to go get, because we're also going to need to feed that into Augur or Grimoire Lab so that we can compare what the project looked like when it was at a company and compare what it looks like now that it's at a foundation. So it's not as simple as just taking these JSON files and feeding that data into a tool or an API, because there's all of this data that's going to have to be gathered that goes around it that we're going to need for the analysis. So I think that if we just try to pull the URLs without knowing like the dates that are relevant and things like that, I think it's going to be more confusing for the research team than if we build the data set with the as much data as we think that we're going to need, so that we can later figure out, because right now we need to see what data we have. We need to get that in a format that we can eventually feed it into something else. So any sort of machine readable format, we can use that, we can parse that and feed the URLs into Augur, Grimoire Lab, or the GitHub API. But until we have this data somewhere, we don't know what we need, and we don't know what dates we care about. Because we also might want to, based on all of this data, depending on how much data we end up with, we may decide that we want to sample it, and we may not want to feed every single URL. Or maybe we decide we want to start with a certain type of project, like Apache, whatever their equivalent of graduated. So maybe we want to filter out the incubating, or maybe we want to filter out the CNCF sandbox projects. Or you see what I mean? There's so many decisions that need to be made that until we get the data into some sort of a data set, I think it's too early to decide which tool is going to be the right tool to use to feed the data in. Does that make sense? I don't know, Sal, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, and sorry if there's background, but my flatmate is very loudly listening to Harry Potter, Stephen Fry, and I can't get it quieter than this. But so what I think I'm hearing is that there's going to be an element of data scraping first that we're going to turn into a matrix. That's going to make this available conceptually to the researchers here. In this case, they're just data scientists. And then we can use Augur or Grimoire in order to scrape the information that we have about the way the community has engaged pre and post. I'm always all for analyzing as much data as you can, so I'm going to try to get that as full of a matrix as we can. But I think I'll just throw up a GitHub issue after this, and I will provide a set of indexes that I think work, that are added information to what we're getting on top of the GitHub repos. And then see if everyone agrees, because if we do agree, yes, there's gonna have to be manual searching at some point, so we're gonna have to pitch in for that part.
Yeah, and
But
we're
the
gonna
web
have to do that
scraping
before we feed in the URLs, because until we do that manual piece, we don't have the before URLs or the before
Mhm.
dates.
Yeah, yeah. But it's easy enough to do in like less than 2 weeks or so, get that web scraped and show us what we do have and what we need to reach out to the foundations for more.
Yeah. And you can add it to this issue right here, issue 90, because that's the one where we started some of that work, or create a new one if you think that that's if that's easier to track the deliverables in smaller
That's
issues.
perfect. I'll add it right under.
Okay, Sean, does that make sense?
Yeah, following.
Okay.
I put something in chat. So I mean, I guess when we see what these files are, I can provide some useful comments.
Yeah, we need to move the data that Brian sent an email into this document, because I haven't done that unless somebody else has.
I did.
Oh no, here it is.
I mean,
Yeah.
kind of my
And
expectation is
Brian,
Brian's data would just be descriptive data about the projects, probably.
no, these are JSON files.
Okay.
So like I'm not sure what created is, whether that's when the project was moved into Apache. We probably need to get some clarifying details from Brian about these, but the email had some details about which, let me just go back to my email. So he said that he thinks the most useful would be the projects.json. Which might be that one. Is it that one?
Yeah, it's the main.
Yeah. So this is probably the most useful.
Interesting.
Where's that link? Oh, there it is.
And then
Oops.
so this one has, oops.
One thing I can tell you from experience analyzing this data is it's really important to know the dates that a project moved. So Brian's given us a point in time when things are incubating. It's important for us to know when it became incubating.
Is that in the incubated project's history, Jason?
Yeah, I think
yeah.
we might have to composite these together, because in the main one, I'm just seeing, yeah, I'm not even seeing the incubator or anything else state. It's just the licensing and stuff. So I think we must put these JSON together to get the answer.
Yeah, I think so too. But okay, so I think that's a start. And so this is a project, just to be clear, that the CHAOSS Africa researchers team has agreed to do. So it's something that they want to do the work on. So Sal and Sophia have agreed to mentor them for this. So
Nice.
those of us that pull this data all the time, I want you to resist the urge to jump in and help too much, because we do want this as a learning opportunity for the CHAOSS Africa researchers team who want to do this. Like I've done this a
They have
million times, so I
questions.
could start pulling that data, and it's been really hard to resist that urge.
Yeah.
To write some Python and parse some JSON and YAML.
But they'll have questions and they'll be hitting the reality of this data that you play with all the time. So if there's anything trickster about it, do let them know so they don't have to go through the frustrations that you have.
Yes, please. Yeah, we really do need to encourage everyone to ask questions.
Yeah.
We can ask questions of Brian. He's intimately involved with the Apache data and understands some of the nuances behind it. I'm intimately involved in some of the CNCF data, like I think Sal is as well. So I think we can answer, like they're going to be contextual questions. What does this mean? And so I think that there are those of us who can help, not just with the parsing, but also with just the interpreting and understanding it. So I would encourage them to bring questions into the data science working group channel where lots of us can help out.
I mean, I think it's the one piece of guidance I would provide to these groups is that looking at these files, what I really see is metadata. So this is really data listing the projects. It's not information about activities on the project. So you would use the URLs provided here to use either Augur or GrimoireLab to gather more expansive data. And I think GrimoireLab might be a better choice because as I understand it, Apache from a issues resolution perspective uses a different tool than any platform issue tracker, right? I can't remember the name of the tool. It's somebody will say it and I'll know.
I don't remember what Apache, Bugzilla actually, I think is what Apache.
Yeah. So GrimoireLab has a plugin in Percival to get Bugzilla data.
Yeah,
And
the Apache projects also have mailing lists.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think Grimoire might be a better choice, but we'll need to work with that team and see if they have an instance that we can use so we don't have to spin up a new instance of GrimoireLab. And they're generally pretty amenable for projects like this. Actually, okay, yeah, we'll talk to Georg because they've already loaded all of the CNCF projects into GrimoireLab. They have an instance that has that. And so there might be something that we can collaborate with Georg to do.
Yeah.
And so that we're not gathering that data again. And he might have the Apache data too. I don't know. He's done lots of, well, the whole Grimoire Labs team has done lots of various research projects. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like we've talked on this
Mhm.
project to death. Unless anybody has any more questions, we can
I
continue.
think all good. I'll throw in an issue, get a vote, and take next steps before next meeting.
Awesome. I'm going to skip forks and relicensing because that's more of me talking. And I want to because I want Chan's perspective on this next one. And I know she has a hard stop at the bottom half of the hour. So this was something, Chan, that came up in the last meeting. And we talked about, so CHAOSS, Open Source Summit's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. CHAOSScon is Thursday afternoon. And we were thinking maybe we could, not really like a hackathon, but some sort of data analysis morning where we could all get together and work on, one of our projects, maybe a couple of our projects. And we were thinking that, I mean, yeah, we could probably finagle a room from the Linux Foundation, although they said that the morning is full, so we might be able to get a hallway corner somewhere. But given that we have all of these folks in Africa who are working on this and who are unlikely to be able to travel to OSSNA, we were wondering if maybe there are good spaces where we could do this on the cheap and or on the free, somewhere in Denver, like, companies who have offices there who regularly host them out to meetups, even though it would be during the week and during the day.
I would love to help do that. I'd love to help coordinate all of that, get it together. Um, I can start looking at some spaces and see what we have available, and then we can kind of figure out, um, are you thinking hybrid then? Um,
Yeah, because this is part of why we were thinking maybe a company would give us a conference room for
Okay.
free, because they would have all the video equipment already set up, and so we could have some in person and we can have some remote participation as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a ton of fun, and I'd love to help do that. So I can put that on my list and start checking some places that we can get hopefully for free. And if there's anything else that you all need help with for Chaos Con, I can do that since I'm here in Denver.
Cool. And we might be able to, you know, if we need to spend some money, we might be able to get someone to sponsor it because the Linux Foundation gives us a room for OSSNA for CHAOSScon. We're actually not allowed to have sponsors for CHAOSScon because the Linux Foundation already pays for everything.
Okay.
But we could get somebody to sponsor this. So we could talk to Red Hat, we could talk to Google, some of the people who are typically friendly about sponsoring CHAOSScons, and see if one of them wanted to, you know, buy us some snacks and a meeting room somewhere if we had to. But it'd be nice if we could just do this at a company location.
Yeah,
Has
that
anybody,
sounds good.
I mean, if I don't know where the conference venue is, I haven't looked that deeply into it yet. If it's anywhere close to a university, usually we can get universities to give us space if we don't have a company.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's downtown and but I can see what companies are nearby. The university is a little bit of a walkover, but I can try for that too. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think we start with companies and then use the university as a
last
back.
resort.
Oh,
Yeah.
actually we have CU downtown right next to the convention center and we're friends with their data science team, so I'll reach out to them. That's actually a great idea. Thanks, Sean.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I
there.
just know where I get my free stuff.
Mhm.
I'm sharing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I just remember them, so I'll reach out to them.
Yeah, also universities are wonderful places. I love giving talks at universities or doing workshops at them because you get some of the most like obsessive open source contributors. It's lovely, catch them early.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Cool.
totally.
Thanks for bringing that one up.
Awesome. So also think about how we might want to structure that hackathon. Like we don't necessarily want it to be just sitting around and writing code because that's not, you know, there are people who do data science and data analysis who do other things. So we want to make sure that we're inclusive to people with a wide variety of skill sets. So, you know, some of it could be manually tracking down some data that really anybody could help out with. Some of it might be more, you know, in depth. Some of it might be discussions about how to structure the data, like the one that we just had around the corporate projects. We could do lots of different things. So we should continue to think about what that might look like.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. Thanks, Don.
Awesome. Anything else on that agenda item before we skip back? There's also, it's not going to take me long to talk about forks and relicensing. So if anybody has any agenda items, please go ahead and add those in or just, you know, shout them out after we talk about forks.
I do want to come back to the hackathon, not a hackathon, whatever you want to call it, idea. It's a really good chance to Stephen Fry still in the background, I'm sorry. But
We
it's
can
a
barely
really
hear it. It's more distracting for you than it
I
is
can
for us.
hear it. Took the door closed. It's a really good chance before the event to bring together and isolate the specific identities that you see within your community, right? Because you mentioned like basically ethical OSINT and data analyst, and to put together a series of like how they engage in the community and like for each of them say like, all right, read through these different identities. Here's how you can engage in the groups. And especially in a hackathon space, having people identify what they're good at to go and compile it onto a team tends to really help to get them together. I think that would be really, really cool. And it like solidifies the GitHub repositories with everyone in real time with that way of working with it.
That's a really good idea. And I think that might also be an exercise that we want to do in this group to get more people involved and engaged in the research projects because there are there are loads of ways to contribute to these data science projects. It's not, it's not necessarily writing a bunch of code. It's not necessarily doing, kind of like hardcore network analysis. There's lots of different types of work that need to be done. And I think we haven't been, I know I haven't been very, very clear about that because it's complex and, but it might be something we could do a little bit with this corporate project as well, because that gives us an example and we can talk about the types of things that we need related to that specific project. And that might give us a starting point on that.
Yeah, that would
Yeah,
be cool.
Yeah,
I
because I
love
think
that.
oh, go ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna say, I love that idea, and I actually was just looking at their issues and all the projects that you've tagged on, and I actually like that the research group is going to do this project. I think you have another person and their students doing a different project, and so I like the idea of having these teams, and then having different roles in those teams so that people can feel like, yeah, I'm contributing, my strengths to this project. I have to drop, but I love this and want to keep talking more about it. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Do you have anything else on that, Sal?
No, but this is generally called, if you want to make it agile, cross-collaborative identities. So because you don't want people to feel isolated, join as many groups and engage with that identity. So I'll write that up along with maybe, and this is turning into a separate issue, but I'll put a separate issue around like the identities around data science projects. And that should open up a really good discussion because my opinions are just mine on that. I'd love to see what like the top 3 we can identify are.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back to the Forks relicensing discussion. I will say that I've made absolutely no progress on this project, other than going and talking about it in a bunch of places. So I've done a whole bunch of talks. I haven't done any what I'll call real work on it. So so I would like to dig back into that. The same thing with Chan. So I know that she started to gather some of the data using Augur and 8 on some of these projects and their forks. And there was still some work that had to be done because things needed to be filtered out, because of course the forks also contain all of the original project commits and some data. So I think there was some date filtering that had to happen. But she's still interested in doing that work. But she was on vacation and on holiday, so she hasn't, I don't think, made a ton of progress on that either. So I think that's part of the next step, and part of it is getting some of this written up into more of a Linux Foundation style report.
Yeah, I think that knowing when the project's changed category will be important, because usually the commit log doesn't jump somewhere else. Like the commit log will all be the same. So we'll need to know the date.
Yeah, we have that. We have the
Okay.
exact dates.
Yeah, and I should have a matrix format in 2 weeks that we can just easily play with and that we can verify.
Yeah.
That's
But I
good.
think for the forks and relicensing, we have that, because that's just we
Yeah.
have the dates. So if you look at the OFA paper, you can see the dates for each of the analyses. So we just need to use those same dates when we look at it in Augur and 8.
Yeah. Yeah. Forks and relicensing is easier than the CNCF Apache stuff, because you don't have like 50 people deciding on category changes.
Yeah, and it's 6 projects and not
Yeah. Hundreds.
almost 200.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little bit easier. The other thing that we've done, which isn't actually here in the agenda. Sorry, let me just grab the URL, because we have put together some publication guidelines for the projects. So I'm just gonna add that here. So this was something that Tassan from the CHAOSS Africa researchers group asked for. So this has some details about the type of research reports that we're looking at generating. So we're looking at, Linux Foundation style reports, whether they end up on the Linux Foundation research or whether they end up published by CHAOSS. I mean, we still need to figure that out, and it will depend on the individual report. But they're not intended to be academic publications. So the people working on this are welcome to then take the research and create an academic publication. But the work that we're doing within this working group is focused on putting together reports that are, accessible to a wide range of audiences, and that we can get out and not have it take 5 years, which sometimes academic publications do. But people are welcome to do that. So with the forks and relicensing, I did that OFA paper, and Matt and I are working on another paper that we're going to submit around the data that we have so far, the organizational affiliation data. So people are welcome to do that, but that's not what we're focused on in this particular thing. And then it also has details about, I got a copy of the LF Research Style Guide, which just has some details about kind of the various publication style that they use for the reports and language things, stuff like that. And then I just picked APA style and footnotes for the references because we've used APA style in a lot of the other places, like in the practitioner guides. Any questions on the publication guidelines?
Looks good.
Okay. Any other agenda items that people have? Anything else we need to talk about? Okay, we do have a couple of reminders. So, whoops, I copied the wrong things in here. Am I looking at the right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. These were not here. Wait a minute. I'm just gonna grab the reminders from somewhere else, since I put the wrong ones in the data science one. Okay, here we go. So OSSNA, the CFP deadline is, it's actually, I think it's actually the 16th. It's the 17th, but at a weird time zone. So think of that as the deadline is this Sunday, basically. So think about submissions for that. I will probably submit something around the forks and relicensing. I'm also working with someone that I work with in the CNCF Deaf and Hard of Hearing Working Group, and I think we're going to put together a panel around something around contributor growth and getting contributors for your project and building kind of a base of contributors. So that's what I've got kind of in the pipe for that. I might see if there's anything else people want to submit. But I encourage you to get it in there because we do like seeing lots of CHAOSS talks, because we are going to have a CHAOSS Con on Thursday. So we talked a little bit about this. It will be Thursday afternoon. Registration for OSSNA is required. So just so people know. But they're pretty reasonably generous with scholarship tickets for the events. If you're a student or, underrepresented groups, things like that. So that's also a possibility if people happen to live in Denver and want to come but can't pay for OSSNA. There might be other options we could explore. And then I've just added sort of a things to keep track of section. So as we kind of talked about this a little earlier, Kevin Lombard is talking about working on this project with his data science students who will start in summer, but he's using the project as a way to recruit some of those students. So we'll talk more about that as we get closer to summer. Anything else we need to talk about?
Wait, tell us a little bit about this archival project planning, because it sounds very interesting just by these 3 words. But I guess I'm here.
Yeah, so it's basically we want to learn more about the characteristics of open source projects that are that have been archived. and more about, can we predict the likelihood that something's going to be archived? What do some of these projects have in common? The obvious one is inactivity. But what about ones that didn't have decreasing activity and were archived? Do those have something in common? Like maybe they're at companies, owned by companies. There are lots of things we can look at. And so these are just the questions that I originally came up with. Kevin has asked that we not add more detail to this particular doc because he doesn't want to bias the data science students in their research. He wants them to help come up with the research questions. So I don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but this was the idea behind it.
I suspect they're going to run into a large percentage of security graveyard for open source. But I'm curious to see what they find.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm hoping to have them coming in and reporting out on the research and having discussions about the research, the way that we're doing with the CHAOSS Africa team around the corporate projects. So hopefully we can also ask questions and provide, guidance and suggestions along the way. Cool. Anything else you want to talk about? I will mention just one more thing. It's not in here, but I posted about it in the general channel. We are starting a funding impact measurement working group within CHAOSS, and we have our first meeting tomorrow at I think 9 a.m. Central Time. So if you're interested in funding open source projects and helping to measure the impact of whether or not that funding is effective or not, or how we can think about that, I would encourage you to come along to that meeting if you don't have enough meetings on your calendar already. You can always have one more meeting. That's not true. That's a lie. But we tell ourselves that. Okay, awesome. With that, I think we're probably finished, and I give everyone 8 minutes back in your day.
Lovely, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, folks. See you later.